Today I've got a different kind of a video. I don't even know how many of you will watch it, but I am super interested in this kind of thing because I've got 12 fragrances that are at least twice as good as they were whenever I got them. This is a real thing in fragrance. You can get a fragrance that will be okay when you get it, and then it sits for a few weeks or months and it becomes the best thing that you've ever smelled. There's maceration that happens. There are notes that sort of settle and others that become more dominant. So I've got 6 designers slash niche, one niche mixed in there. The rest are clones. And each one of these, whenever I got them, they were okay, or maybe I even didn't like them. And once they set just a little bit, they got way better. And so we're gonna get into this list. Before we do, please remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. Also consider giving a twice as good click to the like button as usual. And we're gonna go ahead and get into this list. First one that I'll mention, this one was a surprise whenever I first got it because people will say things about this fragrance like it's a gourmand lover's dream. And I'm a gourmand lover, so whenever I picked up the original Valentino Wo, I sprayed it on and I thought this is a very, very woody fragrance. Specifically the myrtle note. There's also a cedar note that were dominant in this fragrance. It wasn't until I had it for probably 6 months or so, maybe 3 months or so, that the hazelnut and the chocolate and the sort of more sweet and somewhat spicy notes began to come out more prominent. It's still a very woody fragrance, and I would not call it a gourmand lover's dream, but I would say if you want a gourmand fragrance with chocolate, hazelnut, probably a touch of iris, even though it's not listed, and a lot of woods, then this is a great fragrance. So check it out, Valentino Wo. It really smells fantastic and way better than it did whenever I got it. Next we'll go with a clone. So this one is a clone of 1 Million Privé, an unfortunately discontinued flanker of 1 Million. This is Pandora Scents Milano Privé. And so this one, the same thing. Whenever I got it, there was a musk in this fragrance that I really didn't like. You know, it sort of ruined the fragrance for me, although I could appreciate what the fragrance was potentially to other people because musk smells different to different kinds of people, something about our biology. But the cinnamon and the sweet notes and the tobacco in the fragrance, I knew if they would just come to the top a little and that musk would settle down, I'd really like it. Now though, whenever I spray this fragrance on, I do still pick up on the musk that to my nose reminds me a little bit of hairspray, but it's very much more in the background, and those sweet, spicy notes, the tobacco and the cinnamon and the vanilla, those are actually the things that are the dominant notes, and I think this actually smells fantastic now. Of course, this is Milano Privé. A little time makes all the difference with these fragrances. All right, next up, this one has often been called an alternative to, maybe a clone, but certainly inspired by Bleu de Chanel. I'm talking about this one right here, Missoni Parfum. And so this is a blue fragrance, despite the brown glass bottle that it's in. But this fragrance is one that whenever I first got it, the soapy cleanness of this fragrance, it was just too much. And really, that's the same way I feel about Bleu de Chanel. I don't really like Bleu de Chanel. I like the Parfum probably better than the others, but it comes across as so soapy clean. But now that I've had this for a couple years, I still don't wear it a lot, but the citrus and the sweetness in this fragrance and that blue fragrance kind of shower gel feel is much more prominent. Specifically, there's a certain kind of clean sweetness that's in many of those fragrances that I do like. And so now I do like this fragrance. It is still, there's a little bit of a birch note in here, giving it an almost smoky incense vibe, similar to Bleu de Chanel. And then you've got a lot of cleanness, but I can appreciate this one way more than I did whenever I first picked it up, Missoni Parfum. Next, we'll go with this one. Now this one is surprising to those of you who've watched my channel, this is one of my favorite clone fragrances. I literally have hundreds of clones at this point, and this is in my top 5 for sure. I'm talking about Supreme L'Homme Extreme by Fragrance World. This one, of course, is a dupe of Guerlain L'Homme Ideal Extreme. And whenever I first got this one, all I really smelled was a little bit of that powdery almond and a whole lot of cedar woods, like kind of a sweet cedar. And, you know, and the cedar was so dominant that I thought, man, this fragrance is just woods. Where is the plum? Where is the, you know, the sweet nature of the almond that I'm so familiar with from the Guerlain fragrances? But it only took a couple weeks, really, maybe even a week. And I wore it a couple more times. And this has become absolutely one of my favorite fragrances. There's still plenty of cedar in there, but it's actually a very impressive cedar note. It doesn't smell cheap or synthetic like a lot of clones or cheap fragrances with cedar, but there is this gorgeous plum almond, this sweetness in the fragrance, mixing with that cedar that is absolutely magical. Again, it's one of my favorite fragrances. This stuff is awesome, Supreme L'Homme Extreme, but it wasn't super awesome for those first few days. This one will be surprising to some of you. When I first got my bottle of Dior Homme Intense, I loved the way that it smelled. I mean, everything about this fragrance is right up my alley. It is sweet, it's woody, it's iris, it's a gorgeous work of art, but it lasted like 3 or 4 hours. And I don't know if it was more sort of nose blindness, olfactory fatigue, whatever you want to call it, anosmia, or if it actually was a matter of maceration. Because now this fragrance, it still smells as amazing as it ever did, but it's about a, you know, 7-hour fragrance on me. It's still not the beast that it is for some people. I actually have some clones of DHI that perform better than this one does, but it's definitely in that sort of average to above average territory now. And so it's also one of my favorite fragrances. I love this stuff, but man, performance really let me down whenever I first got a hold of it. Go with another clone here. Now this one, it got some hype when it came out because it's super cheap. It's often around $15, sometimes even less. And it was supposed to be a clone of La Nuit de l'Homme Bleu Electrique. And so there wasn't any other clones of that fragrance when this came out. I'm talking about Lattafa Ejazi Intensive Silver or Intensive Ejazi Silver, something like that. And this one, whenever I first sprayed it on, there's a certain earthiness in this fragrance, almost like an animalic note that was so dominant that I really didn't like the way that it smelled. Now, over time, one of my sons latched onto this fragrance and started to wear it constantly. And in the air, this fragrance was very impressive, even a year or so ago. And what it ended up smelling like was La Nuit de l'Homme with a leather note. Now, whenever I wear this fragrance, that animalic note is still there, and so is that, you know, cardamom, spicy, sweet La Nuit de l'Homme feel, but it actually smells like sort of an impressive leather take on La Nuit de l'Homme. I don't think it's all that close to Bleu Electrique. It's definitely in the La Nuit de l'Homme family, but I think this is one of the best bargains for a fragrance you could find anywhere. You may just need to give it a few months before this one really starts to smell great. Ejazi Intensive Silver. Another one that I'm very impressed with. This fragrance right here, another cheapie. This one's from Pepe Jeans. It's called Celebrate. And this one, I had seen some reviews where everybody said, man, it smells great, but it only lasts 4 or 5 hours. And so I began to wear it, and that was my experience. Smells amazing. There is this black currant, there's a cacao note, there's some cinnamon, there's a bunch of spices actually. I think cardamom, maybe even some pepper, bunch of spiciness and some gourmand sweetness with some fruitiness at the top. And it was only lasting 4 or 5 hours. However, only a few weeks in, I'd maybe had it for a month, and I was wearing it a lot because I really liked the way it smelled. This is a couple years ago. And I started to notice this would last all day. At the end of 9 or 10 hour workday, I would still smell this fragrance. And I would say now, without hesitation, this is easily a 10-hour fragrance. I don't know if it just macerated or if my nose got used to it. This stuff smells phenomenal and it's very long lasting. Another one of those insane value fragrances. Pepe Jeans Celebrate. All right, this next one here. This is one that I had heard that it had kind of beast mode performance, yet whenever I got it, that was not my experience. You know, again, 4 or 5 hours for the first few days is all I was getting. I'm talking about Shagaf Oud Tonka by Swiss Arabian. However, as I wore it more, I've had this maybe 6 months or so now, as I wore it more, the longevity on this thing is very, very impressive. It's easily a 10-hour fragrance. I don't know why I couldn't smell it after 4 or 5 hours, but it was probably more my own biology and psychology that was blocking it out. But this stuff smells amazing. You've got a powdery almond, you've got tonka, which can also come across powdery. You've got vanilla. It's a sweet, gourmand, almost baked goods kind of powdery fragrance. Definitely unisex, but great performance. Even after you wash it off, you'll still smell this stuff. Shagaf Oud Tonka. All right, another one that will probably be surprising to some. This is a Manera, and this one, so many people said beast mode performance that whenever I got Cedrat Boisé Intense, and it only lasted for 4 or 5 hours, I thought, man, what is the deal with this fragrance? I actually reached out to the retailer to be sure that I didn't get a fake. I got it like a month after it came out. I didn't think there would be such a high quality dupe with the magnetic cap a month after it came out. But anyway, it's not a fake, and it was totally anosmia. It was blocking it out. It's a strong fragrance. I think it's like 35 or 40% oil concentration. It's an extrait de parfum, so very potent stuff. And you will probably go nose blind to this fragrance. There's a lot of synthetics in here, of course. But if you want a citrus, woody, a little bit of leather, a little bit of oud, but mostly just a very pleasant fruitiness with some citrus mixing with woods, this stuff is incredible. Any time of the year, it smells fantastic. It probably lasts 12 hours, but don't be surprised if you go nose blind. Again, Intense Cedrat Boisé. We'll go with this one, which again, I was a little bit surprised whenever I sprayed it on because I thought the synthetic cedar note in this fragrance is so very cheap smelling that I don't think I'll ever wear it. So this is Aether Exate by Fragrance World. Cheap probably isn't the right word, but it smelled so synthetic. That's the right word. But after it sat on the shelf for a little while, you know, this has got a dominant apple note. There's also some citruses mixing with kind of like a green apple. Very fresh, bright, fruity fragrance. The woods, this synthetic textured woodiness in this fragrance really smoothed out a lot. It's not as, you know, spiky or grating like nails on a chalkboard like it was when I first got it. And now it's just a pretty mellow citrus apple fragrance with a nice wood underneath. I still do perceive it as synthetic, but nothing like I used to. Again, Aether Exate. This one is, again, a powerful fragrance, an extrait de parfum. And finally, this one, I probably should have started with this one. It was one of the most dramatic. I got this fragrance and I thought, man, this is just cheap, it's no good. I'm talking about Alhamra Hercules. The first couple times I wore it, in the first few days I had it, it just smelled kind of like a, you know, vanilla-esque fragrance, not much going on, just a little bit of vanilla, pretty weak, you know, very unimpressive fragrance. A week or two later, I go back and spray it on and I thought, this smells like Parfums de Marly Herod. It's a tobacco fragrance with some spice and with a lot of vanilla, some pretty powerful vanilla. It's sort of like in the style of Tom Ford Tobacco Vanille, but not as extreme on the spices, but it's got that same kind of dark tobacco and sweet vanilla with a little bit of spice. This stuff is awesome. It smells very close to Herod, but I had to give it a little time in order for it to get there. So that has been 12 fragrances that whenever I got them, for one reason or another, I wasn't that impressed, but just a couple weeks or maybe a month on the shelf changes everything. And that would be my encouragement in this video. If you get a fragrance, you don't like it, or especially if you think it's very weak, give it a little time. A lot of fragrances you can't return anyway, so give it a couple weeks, try it again, and countless times I've discovered that fragrances get way better with time. They get stronger, they change, notes sort of shift position. So let me know down in the comments, what have been some of the fragrances you've encountered that have changed the most dramatically over time? Also, remember to subscribe to the channel and give a twice as good click to the like button if you did enjoy the video. I'm Justin, this is Sillage Scents.